Yeah, so you were saying that growing up, at first you felt like everything was a chore.
Yes, I felt almost like the things that I was doing, it was more like a chore. And until recently, I think it was a conversation that I had with a friend of mine, and she was just appreciating certain things about me. And she said something that stood out to me. And she said one thing, because I mean, she knows my family very well. She used to always be at home with me. And she said, one thing, Helen did a good job, you know. And I said, what do you mean? And she said, you can cook really well and you cook very fast. And I say, well, yeah, I was always cooking at home, you know. And that's when it really hit me that I think, like, at a certain point in my teens, my mom was very busy doing her master's. And I would cook after lunch and I would cook majority of the meal on a Sunday. So I got really into cooking from young,
Yeah.
but I saw it almost as a burden for a long time until I realized that, like, that was my contribution to the family, that was my skill, and that was the way that I kind of helped the household to run.
Yeah. And that
And
was you being a complementary aspect of the family and bringing that value because we needed to eat, right?
yeah.
And you nourished the family. That's a huge role to play.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hmm.
And I think about it too with things that Soler does, and I can probably compliment him more on things that he does. He's extremely organized.
Yeah.
Yes, extremely organized. Keeps his toys, well put together and all of that.
Is that an arrow or a trident?
It's an arrow.
Both. I'll
Yeah, both.
take both. Yeah. Beautiful. Yeah, and so I guess in that way to be direct about it, you know, to be using the arrow and the trident reference. Um, to be clear in your communication about it to each member of the family unit, first self to self, as I always say with sacred dialogue, self to self, and then every contextual intimate partnership. So even as parents, no matter how the relationship unfolds, if you are parents to a child, you're always parents to a child, and you want to, and neither parent can be the other parent, and there are things that each parent does value in the other parent and must value, because either way the child carries, um, I'll say, a fourth of each of us. So it's so one fourth mom, one fourth dad, one fourth self, one fourth divine nature and nature, supernatural nature, like whatever nature, external, the world. And of course, there are many other different variables, but I'm just trying to make a point in that way. So I have had mothers tell me, oh, I don't want him to end up like his dad, and I say, that's, you're out of order to say that. Because he will end up like his dad, and he will end up like you, and he will end up like himself. He will have a bit of everything, and you don't want to instill that hate and fear in him of what he can take from all of the characters that is pro his life.
Yeah. And I think too that, I mean, there are a lot of different ways in which we can end up like somebody too. I don't think that it's fair to completely discount the other parent entirely when, I mean, they contribute so much and we have the choice as to
Oh,
what we choose, what it is that we pay attention to as far as other people's their characteristics and what they bring to the table.
yep, yep. um yeah, I think that, and of course in my work as well, I love that you said that, because there are many positive ways we can end up. It always, we're socialized to see things negatively, and oh, the woe is us, woe is the world, it's all so bad. um because there's no validation to both. when things are bad. So we're always constantly grasping at straws to like give ourselves permission to tantrum, which is what we do here in this podcast. Allow
Yeah.
the venting of parenting and nurturing and support. Allow the venting as much as allowing the compliments of the exchange of being support systems to each other. But also another one that I use often in my work is the idea of taking things personally being a negative thing. Like, why, if I take something personally, must mean that I take it negatively, you
That's
know?
true.
Because
That's so true.
it's me, I'm the one taking it, and I take everything, and I personally, as Xylo, take everything progressively, take everything radically and revolutionarily. That's me. So even if I do contextually take something negatively and hurtfully, I internalize it, I sit with it, I process it, I find the extent to which it is true or not, and calling that out one way or another. So it's not the case that when we take things personally, it means that we are taking things negatively. There is
Like,
positively as well, and there's progressively, there's developmentally, there are all sorts.
yeah. And I feel like there's also, I mean, there's a way to take almost anything constructively, regardless of what it was or how it came across initially.
Yeah.
The effect that it has doesn't necessarily have to be a destructive effect,
Hmm.
you
And
know.
of course, if it is a destructive effect, then I'm all for that as well.
Yes, because I
but
mean,
but
sometimes
not
you
to
need
generalize.
destruction to reconstruct.
Yeah,
So essentially, I guess it's all constructive.
exactly. And it's a matter of allowing yourself to see yourself that way. Like, we're not socialized to allow ourselves to see ourselves that way, which is why we run away from the power of the tantrum. Allowing you as yourself, as a mom, as a parent, to break down and cry and scream and learn something from your child who desires and requires what they require, and will scream to the top of the universe to say, I am present in my primordial self-worth, according to Nikki. And I need what I need, and I require what I require, and you are my source of providence, and I expect you to do your part, and to communicate effectively, gently, kindly, what is your part and what isn't, because not every the parent is not meant to give the child every single thing that is to be received by the child in their lifetime. But when you take ownership of your power, you're not insecure in your power in that way. So it's that idea of, I understand you want this, require and desire this. um it's not within my personal scope, but I will do everything in my power to allow you to support your sourcing of this thing. And that's throughout the lifespan, not just obviously when the child is needing milk, and that's different,
Of
but
course.
other yeah.
Yes. And I really love that you said taking ownership of our power, because I think, I mean, even separate and apart from parent-child relationships, sometimes in any relationship, we give so much power to the other person that we almost want to take their power away, in that um, we think that they have so much power over us that we want to dictate the way that they do everything in order to make our lives or ourselves feel okay, when we have
Yeah.
decision-making power as well, and we can suggest, or we can ask that they respect certain boundaries and allow them to just sort of function within those boundaries in any way that they see fit.
Mhm.
But I think, it takes away our right to blame them for certain things, which can be comforting sometimes when you feel bad and you're just looking for somebody else to be responsible for your problems. But I think owning our power actually, it gives the other people in the situation ownership of their own power in the dynamic as well.
and the alchemical power, because when you are in full ownership of yours and I'm in full ownership of mine, then we have the opportunity to put them together and see what they create. Water and fire don't create water and fire,
True.
right? And steam is very powerful. It creates something totally different. So, but if I'm kind of sort of water, but not I'm more. I have a lot of oxygen. I have some hydrogen. I'm not too sure if I want to be water until I decide I am water. She is fire. We, in ownership of ours, will create steam until each part of the partnership takes ownership of themselves. We cannot effectively move on or create or dance and have fun and make love and bring life.
That takes me back to the example that you brought up of the mom who didn't want the son to be too much like his father. And it's like what the visual that I get is like the water wanting to boil over and put the fire out. And that prevents the steam from being steam altogether because you won't have that heat.
You ever put too much water in a pan and then
Yeah.
it becomes overworking so much that the burner stop working? So
Yep.
out of balance, so out of order, you know, and that things there is, of course, you and I would know the beauty of chaos, but there is chaos and order. You wouldn't be able to contrast what is chaos if there wasn't order. So both, all of it, so. And I reminded her, I mean, you fell in love with this person and made a child of them for a reason. So don't lose sight of that. That is still existing in the father, and it's probably definitely in the son. So
Yeah.
allow him to understand the good qualities of his father and focus on them. That does not mean denying or lying about the other. It's not them kind of superficial, fake or phony love and light. Everything's perfect. It's not that. It's allowing, taking full responsibility, full scope and responsibility, being aware of the ability of us to respond to the situation. So um even when you spoke about, and I know of course you were laughing and giving something in context, but I want to also deconstruct it a little bit with the idea of like losing the ability to blame someone. When you said that, right? If you are good at your own responsibility, taking inventory of it and sharing it with others and highlighting it in others, saying I really acknowledge that your ability to respond under this pressure gives me so much power and so much support. If we are in practice of doing that iron sharpen iron for each other and for ourselves, then blame never is a thing, because the root of blame and guilt and shame is all rooted in responsibility. And if we can each take and give responsibility and responsibility inventory, there's no need to blame or scapegoat or deny each other's power.
It's true.
You know?
I mean, just applying, I guess, to my own personal family dynamic and where blame has come up. In recent times, I have realized I guess, the out of order nature of like the responsibility dynamic um, among us in general. And I feel like, sometimes you choose not to take responsibility for something that is not your responsibility. I'm laughing because it's funny, but it's so true. Um, you choose not to take responsibility, and initially there's that level of like discomfort because the other person is looking at you like, what do you mean that's not your fault? Like, what do you mean that's not that's my responsibility? And I think it comes sometimes, well, for me, when I experience that, it comes from me feeling like I don't have the right to request certain things,
Hmm.
or to I don't have the right to set certain boundaries. I don't have the right to actually claim my responsibility in certain things. And then I want to put it on somebody else and say, well, this is your fault. When I had the right to say, wait, this is what would work best for me. How can that work for both of us?
Mm.
Just as an example, let's just say I need this area clear for me to do this podcast with you today. And this might be the area that, Soleil uses to play. And I feel like, oh, this is his place to play. Like, I can't ask him to clean up his stuff an hour early. But then when he doesn't clean it up in time, I'm like, I needed the place clean for me to do my podcast. And now it's a mess when I had the right to make that request, like, hey, I need this. Can we, somehow work it out for you to, play for an hour less, and then I get the spot, or, something. And it brings me actually like back to the book, because I saw this really, really great example for something that I actually experience very often, which is the fact that, I guess you can tell Sule is not here right now, because he would try to be all up in my space, but he gets that way whenever he sees me giving attention to something or somebody
Yeah.
who is not him.
Yes.
And I never really thought to myself that I have the right to request that he does not do that. And it also did not occur to me that there are things that I can do that could, decrease whatever it is that he's experiencing that makes him feel like he needs to do that. Because I didn't really think about what exactly he might be feeling. I just figured, well, this is what toddlers do. Like, they see their mom talking to somebody, so now I need your attention. And
Can you hold up the book again so that anybody who's watching
oh,
can see?
yes.
Yeah, so it's a positive discipline A to Z. It's an amazing book, and you can read it chapter by chapter, but you can also just open it and see what little nicks and knacks they have in there to help you open your mind to a different way of responding under pressure.
And I love it.
Yeah.
I really love it. I love just popping it open to a random page
Yeah.
and seeing, and I mean, the gems are always like so on point. When I open it, it's almost always like exactly what I need.
Yeah.
But I liked that it brought up the point of, planning things in advance. And even when you can't, because sometimes you might get a surprise phone call, and I can't really, um, necessarily plan to spend time with him before I get the phone call, because I wasn't expecting the phone call. But something that the book suggested is like, if you have a friend just pop up and you know that that's going to happen, but you want to give your friend that undivided 15 minutes to, spend time, you can communicate with the friend that, hey, I want to spend 5 minutes with him, and explain why. And then we'll spend 15 minutes together, because that way he will give me that undivided time with you
Mm-hmm.
if I give him that undivided time first,
Yeah. So um I really love the example that you gave about the space, and I want to represent that however it is we're feeling inside is what gets transferred, right? So if you're feeling insecure in your power, then that's what then the child or whoever else in context feels insecure in your decision, because you're making the decision in non-security. So then they're like, wait, mom's feeling insecure about wanting my space. What does she want it for? And is she going to abandon me? Because now you're focusing on not feeling, you don't want to feel like you've abandoned him. So the focus is abandonment. And so what you're feeling is the vibrational code and frequency of abandonment. So when it's like, wait, why does she feel that she might possibly abandon me? No, let me hold on to her. But if you are calm and you are demonstrating power of boundary and space, then he learns that he also deserves alone time and playtime, and he deserves you time. So that's something that we're constantly learning in ourselves and learning how to teach with all our intimate partnerships, son, lovers, parents, friends, colleagues. We're always learning our power dynamics and our power harmony. As I say in Sacred Dialogue in that way. So I really love that example because it can also be, it can become a thing that you all do together. He helps you um, create the space for your podcast because he learns that, oh, for her to be able to give that time to me, this is part of her work, this is part of her life purpose, this is part of her passion, this is part of her creativity. And mom supports me and I want to support her and I want to feel like I'm a good supporter. So you tell him, oh my gosh, you're such a good helper, you're such a good supporter, like I'm so thankful, thank you for giving me that time, and we're going to play right after and probably right before, depending on the ages and the communication abilities. But it's a very important shift to make because however we're feeling is what gets transferred, you know.
I so love that you brought that point up
Yeah.
about the
So,
feeling.
it actually is 20 minutes now, and I feel like we did a nice little like proper
Yeah.
segment. So just throwing that out to you as far as sealing it, that part.
No problem. So, but I'm gonna just keep mine recording
Yeah.
anyway, just in
I was
case.
letting you know in case you however you wanted to do it. We can always chop it up and
For
add
sure.
parts after.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
But I experienced something in a friendship of mine recently, and I honestly I feel like what you just said perfectly described what I went through because it was such a strange experience for me. I went through a couple months where I just wasn't really, I was really in hermit mode. I wasn't communicating with many people. I was not really on social media and that sort of thing. And intuitively, I felt like most of my friends got it, like they weren't feeling negatively about me taking space or feeling like I was abandoning them or anything. But with one friend of mine in particular, I had so much anxiety about me taking space because I felt like, oh my goodness, she's not going to like this. She probably feels like I'm not her friend anymore. She probably feels abandoned. Like, she probably thinks I hate her. Should I say something? But deep down, I really didn't feel like I was in like the space to really explain much to people.
Hmm.
So I didn't bother saying anything to her, but the anxiety was there. I just kept trying to ignore it, I guess. Until one day I got a message from her, like a lengthy message, just basically describing exactly what I was feeling this whole time. And I felt like even when I wanted to reach out in small ways, because I would, like during that time, I would, say hi to a friend or just like send a message like, hey, what's up? Or react to their story or something. But excuse me, with that one friend that I was very worried about her reaction, I could not even reach out in not even in a small way because I had so much anxiety around that relationship and what she might be feeling that I just could not, bring myself to interact with her. And it was such a mental like task for me even thinking about it. When I got the message from her, I felt drained. I fell asleep for hours that day. And I had like nightmares. Well, not really nightmares, but I had like these really vivid dreams where she needed me to do something for her and I couldn't. And I felt like I disappointed her. And it was just so much. And I was like, what is this going on? Like this energy exchange is so intense. Like it's so much for me.
Yeah.
And I think it's just, all that thought energy that I put into the fact that she might feel bad about this,
So yeah, so there's that, but I also actually missed a point I wanted to make as well when you spoke about not feeling like you had the right. When you were talking about your son example, and now again with the friend, I wanted to bring up the idea of finding our balance with our rights and responsibilities in every relationship dynamic. And of course, just being kind to all involved and saying that we're constantly learning ourselves and each other. So let's always remember that we're learning how to be human to ourselves and each other. That's why I feel like life gives us more than a day on the planet, because it takes time to learn that. So let's just kind of like preface that in a very blanket, kind to all way. Then we're going to go in. Every relationship has context and history. If you do a basic communication in one-on-one class, you'll find that that's two of the topics that they bring up: context and history. And when you say that it's just that it happened, sacred dialogue wise, I'm going to extract that it is just. It is a point of justice that your body, with your anxiety, stopped you, held you back from explaining to her. Because if we look deep enough and with kindness to her, I am sure we would find, if we were to, like, if this was a proper secret dialogue session and we were going to go in, I'm sure you would come out with realizing that boundaries had been broken along the way from way before, and your body having put that need for boundary. It's not that she would have intentionally violated your boundary, but you know she would have violated your boundary. And that's a difficult thing to communicate if we're not in practice of communicating that with friends, with family, with any, because where do we learn that the relationship dynamics have rights and responsibilities? You have the right to this, but you have the responsibility to communicate this as well. Both, both sides. It's not just you in that one moment. So it's not that I am not saying that perhaps you could have, I mean, of course, I don't know the full context you're bringing this right now in this space. Of course, you could have said something, could have, as in the random possibilities of a human could have said something. But then in the space of contextually trusting the body, there's a reason why you were experiencing that much anxiety, because that person has not successfully made you feel like they are easy either way, with and without you, in a loving way. And I'll put myself as an example. And thankfully, I don't know who this person is, to say that I can. And I'm going to ask you directly, and I ask for your honest response here,
Mhm.
because that's modeling the behavior. By intention, I do my best to do that for all in my life, not just for you, for all in my life. I always say I'm always with you, and I am a person who picks up relationships from where they left off, however many years. And I do remember the very last conversation we had, no matter how many years ago it was. So people do feel easy to walk in and out of my life. So I'm asking you directly, do you feel that if I was more of a friend in a active space in your life every day, that you would be able to remove yourself from me without communicating that in a direct way?
I feel completely safe removing myself from you at any point.
Right.
And I think it also has a lot to do with the fact that you move freely and
That's why,
I
that's what I'm showing. Yeah,
yes.
because I don't steal my alone time, and I don't steal. This is it. I don't steal my alone time from friends and family and lovers, and I don't steal my alone time from myself. When I need to shut it down for me, it shuts down, and when I need to share myself for me and for whoever is involved, I do that, and I have a conversation with myself every time. If I say it's me time and then I end up sharing myself, I have a conversation with myself like, I know we said we were going to do this, but this person needs us, and so we're going to do it. And then I make it up to myself. But I've been doing this and practicing this for years. I'm giving myself as an example, but saying that this takes work. It takes work. It's not against her to say, oh, well, I'm a better friend than her. Yeah, I'm a more effectively practiced friend to myself. That's what it is. And we are all learning to be that every day, because that doesn't mean that even to this day I don't actually have that situation happening in my life right now. But my turnaround is better, and I'm fully aware of what it is, and I can articulate it and have articulated it to all involved in the space where I am actively going through that with about 3 people in my life right now.
Yeah. I was actually pretty grateful for the realization that I had from that interaction with her, because I realized that there are certain people in my life that I am that way with as well. I do not want them to take time from me without me understanding exactly what is going on, why it's happening, when are you coming back, what does this mean?
And that's the humility, right? That's the excitement and the humility and the grace of the relationship. Because that eagerness and enthusiasm to want to connect, that's also just a good feeling to like to be excited to connect to somebody and to like always want them in your life. In a world where there are so many horrible experiences, to find people in your life that you always want to be stuck to, that's a huge experience.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then there's a right and responsibility from you to them and from them to you to be able to find a way to effectively and devotionally communicate that right now I need this.
Yeah. And I think, you know, how you always say, I'm always with you, you know, and even when, like, I mean, the last time that we had our end of month Zoom hangout and you weren't physically present at the time of the hangout, it was like, well, you guys can send me notes or you can record it, but I'm always there, you know, and that's very comforting. And when I apply that to other relationships as well, there are people that I feel very connected to. There's one in particular that I found an old email that I sent to him years ago where he had asked me if I missed him. And I sent a long email explaining to him why I don't miss him. And essentially, it was me saying that I feel connected, whether or not we're in the same country, whether or not we're speaking every day, whether or not I see you once a week or not. I feel that that connection is not affected by these things. So it's hard for me to say, I miss you, because I don't miss you, but I know what you mean.
Yeah,
And that I think is a really powerful realization.
yeah, I love that. I'm not a I too am not a misser of things because I feel like I'm very present in a space. Like if I'm here, I'm undivided here, and then when this space is done, then the next space is done, and then the next space gets my attention. So I do recognize that and recognize that as in rethinking as we do in Sacred Dialogue. I do see myself as an exception and us as an exception in our um, social context and the way we've been socialized. So it does again take a right and responsibility dynamic to be able to explain that to people who we care about, because there are people who are not that way, who do miss people in their primary way of being. It's like an internal culture, as though I'm a whole island or planet or community by myself inside of my SB wheel. And so around here, we don't miss people because we are so into, we're penetrating the space so much. When we are in the space, we're making love to the space so much. It's such an intercoursing that when we break away, we're ready for our alone time. But everybody attaches differently, connects differently, relates differently. And if both sides care about each other, then it takes the vulnerable, full, explicit conversation, the direct, clear conversation, um, to bring people into your world. And I do that. I do bring people into my world. I do take responsibility for the energy that I bring to the space and tell people like, this is how I am and this is how I react. And this is like, I'm very passionate this way. I'm very volatile this way. I'm very connected in this way. I'm very sensitive and sentient in this way. So this is the way I process things. And for some people, I may have to reiterate it. Um, and if I care about that person in my life enough, then I do. And I am going through a lot of changes in that way because I am becoming even more sensitive in that way each moment. So a lot of dynamic shifts will have to happen, for sure, throughout this year. So it'll be, and then before, it used to be that I used to give disclaimers with that. Those things are not disclaimers anymore. It's just me laying down the law. It's just me, standing in my justice of self ownership and informing, keeping people in good form, informing people I care about, who I allow into my life, well, this is what it is to connect with me. This is what it's like. So if you're able, then we'll have a blast. But if you're not, I understand, because either way, this is the Xylo.
This is the
Yeah.
Xylo. I love that it's like the law.
Yeah. That takes time. That has taken. I wasn't here. I wasn't here. It has taken me time, and I say things take the time they take, and we are with it. You know. Of course, I've had panic attacks about it in the beginning of the relationship, that relationship with myself, and realizing all the things I had to break away from, and facing traumas and victimhood states of mind, and contextual victimhood spaces. Um, so learning our rights and responsibilities to ourselves and the way
Yeah.
we relate is the most intimate thing you can do, I think, in my experience.
And I love that you mentioned that you give them the right to walk away from it if they cannot abide by that law. Because I think sometimes out of fear of losing somebody, we don't lay down the law. We kind of just give suggestions. Well, I mean, I like it like this, but if you're not okay with that, then maybe we could try something else.
Yeah, I'm never afraid to lose anyone. Um, Although I experience the terror, I know what decision I will make. I will always release someone. So I will still go through the grieving stage, and I will still go through the anguish of it. It's not that I'm above those feelings. I do. I have suffered with it over time. I don't suffer with it anymore, um, because I have a whole new process of doing it. But I have in the past. But I always know. I always know when, oh, this person's not going to continue the journey with me at all. Like they don't get me. And honestly, in an alchemical way, whoever they are, matters on the planet. It's just that we're not going that way together. So, so then my heart breaks in somewhere in the very beginning of the relationship. My heart breaks knowing you're not gonna come the whole way with me. And it's hard, especially when you really like the person and the personality and the character in context. Like it's like, oh my gosh, what an exciting person. But then you know the decisions that you would make, you know where you all are different. Like in the very beginning of this call, you explained something to me that you were excited about. And I told you that I'm not in support of it. um and that's just to be that's just to be clear, because of our intimacy. If it was something that you were excited about, usually I would be excited about it with you. So I want to take emotional intelligence responsibility and say, well, actually I do have a lot of issues with this thing. So that's why I can't meet you in the space of it fully. Of course, I understand that you're having fun of it, but for me, it's actually something that I really don't like. So, and that doesn't mean so you shouldn't do it. So let me tell you all the things that's wrong with it, and that's my business. That's not my business. That's you are doing that right now. And if for any reason you felt like you really wanted to ask me what it was about, then now you know that I have a different perspective on it, and you could be like, what is your issue with it? Like, could you just explain it to me? And then maybe you would understand, or maybe you would disagree, but it doesn't matter. And again, rights and responsibility, because it would be awkward as well if you come in with all that, how we say in our culture, this body kill your glad, you come in with all of that, and I'm like, okay. And then you
Mm.
ask me what's wrong, well, I don't like it. Like, buddy, all of, all of that is on me, especially if somebody like you, because the truth is nobody can kill your glad. But just because nobody can kill your glad doesn't mean I should disrespect it or dishonor the fact that you didn't have to share that with me and you chose to share it with me. So it would be right if I would just say something, because there is something.
Yeah, and you have the right to that something.
Yeah,
And I also have the right to feel joyful about it despite the something.
absolutely. Absolutely. And just let's think of it like the gender issue. in our world, right, on earth, the gender issue, or this, oh, let's forget the gender issue, the sexuality and sensuality issue, right? And the way you are with that, and the way people are with that in our world, and the way I am with it, and how we rub people the wrong way. Does that mean something? No.
No, they don't have to
It is a
partake.
matter of fact. This is
Yeah.
this is me in form, comfortable in my sensuality, and comfortable in her sensuality, and we express that differently, with and without clothes on, with and without whatever it is. It doesn't, clothes or no clothes, has nothing to do with that. It has nothing to do with these surface and superficial measures that people put on things. Yeah, and that's knowing
So
yourself intimately, erotically, and ecstatically. And that's a
that's
lifetime
the
journey that we get.
Yeah, and I think that's the only way that we can comfortably allow people to get to know us as well. Because I think, I mean, if I'm sharing something with you, but I have this demand that you not only understand like my context, but that you agree to it, it's not going to be very easy for you to even listen to what I'm saying or acknowledge how I feel about it, because you're just going to take offense. Like, it's not something that you are in support of, but you don't have to be in support of it.
Who knew somebody could mind their business?
Who knew?
We did. That's the answer. We knew.
Right?
And that each of us are at different steps along the journey of it. Yeah?
Yeah.
Because here's the real thing now. In Sacred Dialogue, I remind everybody that everybody is right. If you explain to me why you're doing this thing, I probably would understand. And if I explain to you what I don't like about it, you probably would understand.
Yeah.
But
And
there's so much trust in this space. And it's like we're standing back to back on a mountaintop and we're saying, "Oh, what you seeing?" And then you tell me what you see, and I'm like, "Oh, that's interesting." And then I tell you, and you're like, "Oh, that's interesting." And then it still comes down to a personal choice.
yeah. And
And
I
that's
love
yeah.
that. I love that. In all of this, the activity and everything that's going on, I had a little moment about like, about that with one particular person that I had to, deal with in school. Um, so they taught me, we had a very interesting relationship because we had a teacher student relationship in one of my favorite subjects. I was a really good student in that subject, and because of my passion for it, I would get really good grades. So as a teacher student relationship, it was great. And then outside of that particular class setting, we would butt heads on a lot of things because I would always stand my ground on things that I did not want to do at school. And the rights that I felt I had as a student there. Just as one example, there was a punishment that's outlined. When you're late for school, you get a bad mark for punctuality. So I would come to school late whenever, and I took, responsibility for the fact that I would get a bad mark for punctuality. And when it became an issue where so many people in our year were being late, they tried to enforce an additional punishment. And I told him, I'm not doing that. I'm not taking part in that. And he said, no, you have to do it. I said, no, when I came to this school, you all said that this is the punishment for that. And I took responsibility for that. I know I'm late and I know I get this punishment. But any punishment outside of that, I'm not doing it. And we had an entire year of arguing about that punishment thing where I would just refuse to take punishments from him, no matter what it meant. And eventually, we just, I guess, agreed to disagree on that. Like, he just left me alone and everything. And in some ways, I would say, like, initially when the activity came up, and I mean, I have mixed feelings about the institution itself. So at first I was not excited. And then the camaraderie started. I started feeling excited because I have, these friends that are in my group and we're doing this and we're doing that and everything. And he was actually in the same house as me at school. And he was a very fun teacher when it came to sports activities and things like that. And I was like, wow, like, he really used to go hard for us. So I have like so many different facets to our relationship, the relationship between me and him, and a different feeling about him with regard to each of them. Like admiration on one end, and that was like my go-to person for like studies and all these fun activities and stuff when it came to coursework. And then that was my opposition when it came to going to the principal's office. We were always in problems, and all of it is true 100%. And I feel strongly about like all the different emotions I have about him, but it doesn't take away from the others. It just is what it is.
It's all part of it. It's all, and in our culture,
Yeah,
all that in it,
all
right?
that in it.
Yeah, and unfortunately, which is why it's so important that we allow ourselves to mature and come into our wisdom and come into our power and come into our freedom and um orgasmically as well, like come into it pleasurably, in fullness and expansion, in contraction and expansion, in alone time and union and pulsation and reverberation and vibration, to come into our power, because that's the power of freedom. When you are anchored in your freedom, you can go anywhere and choose anything. But until such time as you actually learn, take the time to learn what it really is to consent to something, then you're not necessarily consenting. You've been manipulated to consent to something. And that's a rude awakening, and it's a personal rude awakening. So it's not something to shame people about. And that's why I told you, on a pro safe level and on a power of one and political level, I do have some issues with it. But it's not something that I can speak about in a specific way out loud. It's something that I can only entertain those who are interested in learning individually, because that's the power of what, that's the work. To go out there and to speak on what I can see in my insight would do more damage, and it would just be me sort of, it would come off as more of an egotistical thing if I was to speak it from the amount of so the word that's coming to me is rage, because there would be a sort of calypso rage and Sekhmet rage attached to it, of cut it off, end it, and passion, rage in a passionate way. But really, it's a law, and for me, I'm coming from a sovereign state, and it has taken me time to get here. So when I'm talking to people who are not in that sovereign state, they're not going to fathom the depth of what I'm talking about, because they just haven't done the work for it yet. So if somebody's actually willing to do the work, then I'm willing to have a one-on-one conversation with all the reasons, But other than that, it is a superficial, as in surface thing, and you cannot see the depth of the ocean from the surface. And what you do, enjoy the beach, don't you? Just because you can't see the ocean, the depth of the ocean, doesn't mean you don't go to the beach and enjoy the beach, And that's that humility of humanity, that and I'm thankful for my life experience and my wisdom and my self experience to be able to know that everything is true. And it's a matter of where you're coming from at it. Are you coming with a good heart about it? Or have you educated yourself about it? Are you aware that we are always ignorant about some perspective, that we only have so much of peripheral and we don't have hair? Like, I only have hair because I have the camera. But other than the camera, I don't have hair in my peripheral, you know? And so that's where trust matters as well. And developing trust matters, because I don't have hair.
It's actually comforting to know that we're always ignorant on something,
Yeah, all of us.
because the way perspectives change like over time, like how people go like this, when you change your mind about something, and it's like, yeah, and I'm probably gonna change my mind again, based on information that I get next week and the week after that.
Yeah.
So
And those of us who have certain experience from certain vantage points only have that experience because of our conscious, active, proactive investment in a very specific space. So I can't expect people who do not have the specific experience and life investment that I have been given, graced, and also sought and taught to see things the way I see it.
true.
It's like black people eating all this starch and salt, and naturopaths feeling the anguish of, oh my God, they're killing themselves. We are killing ourselves because we don't know, because we've been cultured to enjoy this and enjoy that, and not realizing, and specifically cultured to not know certain things. So when you get that point of realization and epiphany, it's going to come with some heartache, but that's all that in it.
Yeah, and there's always that choice too, because I mean, depending on why you're doing it, you can choose to disregard the health factor and focus on, hey, this is I'm eating this way because I want the enjoyment of fry bake. I'm not thinking about the oil and the flour and the salt. Like, I just want to eat fry bake because it's
Yeah.
je ne creole. Like,
Yeah, and that's the freedom. There's a freedom of choice, but it's a different one thing when it's an informed decision, and that is the
yeah,
right and responsibility of those in places who take up space to lead and educate. Because it's one thing if you told a person fry bake full of that, and then they can decide their version of moderation in all things. It's a different thing if you say, no, this is super healthy food, have it. And they're like, oh yeah, the person said it was super healthy. And then that is an overt lie, and that is overt
yeah.
deception, and that's when the guns come out, that's when Sekhmet comes out in me, that's when the rage, that's when Calypso comes out in me, and I'm like, wait a minute, you are lying to my people, excuse me, sir. And I'm not vexed with my people, I'm vexed with, in context, the person who is doing the active manipulation in context in the space, right? So if somebody
Mm-hmm.
manipulates your child, it's not, if a teacher manipulates your child, it's not your child you vex with. It's a teacher that's supposed to know better in context to not manipulate the child. But if someone is manipulating the teacher, then we have a bigger issue. And
Yeah,
that is the space I'm coming from.
I feel you.
So that's why I can't say too much on it in context, because the child has already put on their done, and I don't want to break them. It would be wrong. That's not the place I'm fighting from. And the manipulator wins when my child and I are in boards over what they manipulated me for.
Yeah. Wow.
So in context, I will let my child play, but I, as a parent, will know the work I have to do, because on my watch this is happening.
That's so true. That's like, I had that thought when schools were open, and Sole, he eats just like me. He's on a vegan diet, but when they have parties at school, he eats ice cream and cake, and I don't want to have him excluded from ice cream and cake once every 3 months. Let him feel like but at the same time, the teachers are aware, and they will tell me, oh, by the way, just in case, like if there's a pizza day, parents who don't eat cheese might send their own pizza with the child, or something like that. And we even had like a smoothie day, because I used to send him to school with smoothies, and the teachers were like, do you want to come and do smoothies and stuff? But I always keep in my mind, like when there's a party, I'll just let him eat the cake. It's not a grave thing if he has a slice of cake today. When I feel like I don't want him to, especially at this age where he cannot really understand why. I don't want him to feel like he's excluded from the group that he's with every day, doing everything with and playing with.
And it's so you see, when you are on the battlefield, on the ground, under pressure, You're learning the power of your tentacles and which ones have stronger arms, and you're choosing your battles. And you're humbling to your strengths, and and the latency of growth. And so it's one that it's a choice, and you decide, okay, well, I'm going to let that one slide, and I'm going to, but all he is learning from you is that you're learning to parent him, and you're learning to parent yourself your whole life, and you'll be learning to parent him his whole life. and and making that an explicit part of the conversation is important, not just pretending that we're vegan and this is what we do and we're laying down the law. And it's 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 a learning journey. It's a
Yeah, it
progressive,
is.
positive discipline and practice to every day under each contextually shape-shifting pressure, to be able to say, all right, this is what we're going to do. This is how we do. Until you find some other effective way to effectively communicate to all involved. Do not feed this child other this. But what if he had an allergy to it? Then they would.
Yeah.
Then it would be different.
Yep.
You know?
Very different.
So it's a matter of also and everybody's different with it. So for example, the reasons that I am vegetarian, because of the reasons that I am, I wouldn't make the exception. You know, um, but that doesn't mean I haven't made the exception. But I'm talking about the reasons and the more practiced reasons. So it just depends, and that again is the humility and the awareness of coming into knowledge on things and realize, oh, like if I knew then, dissolving that concept of if I knew then what I knew now, and putting yourself down, but just being true to what it is you do know and what you realize you can effectively practice, and not beating yourself up about it. Finding your current balance, because that current kinetics creates that infinite potential, allows for space for that infinite potential if you are honest about where you really are with it, not where you'd like to be in your idealism, where you really are with it, and finding the beauty and the power from that vantage point.
So true. I love that. I don't know if this is gonna cut off. I
Yeah,
don't know
it's
how
like
it
an hour
works. It's
now.
gonna cut off. Yeah. So I just want to, before it cuts off, I just want to tell you thanks so much for doing this with me
Absolutely.
and for joining me for this hour. It
Absolutely.
was really, really, really enjoyable to
Yes,
have your energy
and
and to catch up.
I'm so glad to be here.
And I'm so glad that you're here as
Yeah.
well.
Okay.
So thanks again.
You're welcome.